Simplified Potato Trade News, script haul. This food being given away for free, and the people running it say more people want it than ever before. Tyler Hell says last year, 15,000 people came to the event. 50 shipments of Canadian potatoes gone. No warning, no fight. They just disappeared from U.S. stores in just a few months. Prices went way up overnight, turning a $3.50 plate of French fries into a $5.25 expensive treat. The golden, crispy tastes people loved was replaced by weak, uneven replacements. And while Americans complained about soggy fries, Canada's farmers were making a $1.6 billion deal with Asia, sending their best potatoes halfway around the world instead. Was this the quietest trade breakup in North American history? We're expecting over 30,000 people to come through our doors and collect over 600,000 pounds of food. I've heard of people coming from Kamloops. I've heard of people coming from North Vancouver. On April 2nd, everything changed for the simple potato. Without any public buildup, no long debates on TV. And definitely no friendly phone calls to Canada. Washington put a 35% extra tax on every single potato crossing the border. It didn't matter if they were fresh, frozen, or seed potatoes. They all suddenly got hit with the same tax. One day, Canadian potatoes were part of an everyday shopping list in the U.S. The next day, they were treated like a fancy import. The kind of move you might expect for designer purses, not the ingredient. Behind a plate of fries, the numbers made the shock even worse. A big bag of potatoes that used to cost $20 shot up to $30 almost overnight. That might sound small on paper, but multiply it across truckloads, restaurants, and diners, and it becomes a wall between buyers and sellers. For everyday people, the change showed up in ways they could taste. A plate of fries that had been $3.50 jumped to $5.25 in just 3 months. It wasn't slow price increases creeping in. It was an instant shock to the wallet. And the worst part, the fries weren't even better. So that's $60,000 a week in sales that are just gone. They've disappeared from the United States. We're replacing it, and we're replacing it with import wines from France, from South Africa, from Australia, from New Zealand. There was no warning to get ready for it. No talks between trade teams to make the blow softer. The decision came down, like a closed sign flipped without explanation. Canadian farmers, exporters, and truck drivers were left staring at contracts they could no longer afford to keep. On the other side, U.S. importers had to choose between paying steep new prices or scrambling to find potatoes from somewhere else. Neither choice came without pain. And while the tax was sold as a move for trade fairness, the effect was anything but fair to the people actually feeding the system. That's 50%, I believe. And now Ecuador is at 15%. So we're trying to move our shrimp production over to Ecuador, which is huge. We do 500,000 pounds of shrimp a year at restaurants, especially the small family-owned ones, felt the pressure right away. They couldn't just raise prices without risking their regular customers walking away. Swapping in cheaper American potatoes seemed like the easy fix until plates started coming back half-eaten. The texture wasn't right. The color was off, and there was that faint chemical aftertaste that no amount of ketchup could hide. Diners noticed. And in the food business, once customers start noticing for the wrong reasons, they don't stick around. For Canadian producers, the message was clear. Their biggest buyer had just become their most expensive one. Every shipment that used to roll down into the Midwest or New England now came with an extra price tag that made it harder to compete. Some shipments were canceled completely, others just quietly stopped being ordered. It wasn't a loud breakup with press releases and threats. It was the kind of quiet exit where one side simply stops showing up, despite the White House saying otherwise. The job market is slowing much faster than the president claims. Hiring is down, and after months of non-stop price increases for decades. The potato trade between Canada and the United States was one of the most dependable cross-border partnerships in North America. It wasn't just about moving food. It was about a rhythm that farmers, truck drivers, restaurant owners, and even customers had come to rely on without thinking. Every year, around 350,000 metric tons of Canadian potatoes made their way south, enough to feed 17 million U.S. households. From fresh potatoes on grocery store shelves to the crisp, golden fries served in diners and fast food chains. The supply chain was so steady that nobody questioned it. It was as much a part of everyday life as Tuesday night football or morning coffee. Minnesota diners ran on Prince Edward Island potatoes, the way some people run on caffeine. Northern states, where long winters limit local crops, depended heavily on this steady stream. The trucks rolled in like clockwork, keeping storage buildings stocked and fryers sizzling. It wasn't just business, it was a quiet, unspoken promise between neighbors who trusted each other's quality and timing. For years, that trust held strong, even during smaller political fights or market hiccups. Then came the tax and the silence that followed. When Washington's 35% price wall went up, it didn't just make potatoes more expensive. It broke the flow that had been running smoothly for decades. By the second quarter of 2025, Canadian potato exports to the U.S. had fallen by 41%, the steepest drop since the 1980s. There wasn't a slow decline or a series of tense meetings to work through it. It was as if someone had turned off a tap that had been running for generations, worth $28.4 billion in 2024. The boycott has affected other parts of the store. 2. How is that affecting these perceived American products like Coca-Cola or Lay's? What made it stranger was the way it happened. There was no dramatic public fight, no headlines about heated negotiations, no back-and-forth retaliations. Instead, Canadian shipments just began to disappear from the usual delivery routes. Orders were canceled quietly. Some contracts weren't renewed. Warehouses that once held stacks of premium pay potatoes stood empty. U.S. importers started looking elsewhere, not because they wanted to, but because they had to. The company's history, who it's been owned by in the past, versus now, what are its Canadian ties? But some items are hard to replace. Mangoes and pears you can get from different parts of the world. In the Midwest, restaurant owners noticed the change almost right away. Regular customers who had been coming in for years began to ask why the fries didn't taste the same. Small-town diners found themselves swapping quality for whatever they could afford, and the difference was obvious. On the Canadian side, farmers reduced their planting area by as much as a quarter, not because of bad weather or bugs, but because there was no longer a guarantee that their biggest customer would still be buying. The breakup wasn't loud, but it was devastating. What had been one of the most stable and mutually helpful food trades in North America became a ghosted relationship. Almost overnight, the trust that took decades to build didn't break with a bang. It faded quietly, replaced by uncertainty on both sides of the border. And once a steady flow like that is disrupted, it's never as simple as just turning it back on, and political chaos. Our next report tells you more. The impact of the tax didn't stay hidden in trade reports or government memos. It spilled right onto people's plates. Across the United States, diners and restaurants began to notice something was off. The fries didn't look or taste the same. Instead of the crisp, golden perfection customers were used to, they were limp, unevenly cooked, and sometimes carried a faint chemical aftertaste. For regular customers who had been eating the same plate of fries for years, the change was obvious. Some complained, others just stopped coming back. Small family-owned diners were hit the hardest. These places don't have the negotiating power of big chains like McDonald's or Wendy's. They couldn't call up suppliers and cut special deals. Instead, they were stuck between raising prices or making smaller portions. Many chose to serve smaller plates rather than risk driving away their regulars with higher costs. The result was the same. Customers noticed they were paying more and getting less. In the restaurant business, that's a recipe for lost loyalty. I click the prices seems to go up every week, every month, but every time I come, I see the difference in the price, especially fruits. For some owners, the frustration went beyond the fryer. They had built their menus and reputations on the quality of Canadian potatoes, especially the premium ones from Prince Edward Island. Switching to American sources wasn't just a change in supply. It was a compromise in the very product they were known for. One diner owner in the Midwest summed it up bluntly. "We didn't change suppliers by choice. We changed because our Canadian trucks stopped showing up." Within a week, he said, customers were asking why the fries tasted different. Within a month, he could see the drop in people coming in. Donald Trump's chaotic taxes are already bleeding our economy of good-paying jobs. On the Canadian side of the border, the fallout was just as real. Farmers who had long relied on steady U.S. contracts suddenly found themselves with two many potatoes, and nowhere to send them. Some processors scaled back orders, others shortened contracts. With the largest buyer gone or buying less, planting the same amount of area became a gamble. Many couldn't afford to take dot in provinces like Prince Edward Island, New Brunswick, and Alberta. Some farmers cut their planting area by 15% to 25% in a single season. Not because of weather,